A lot of stuff happening in the world of professional wrestling within really the last 24 to 48 hours, and we're going to talk about it all next on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. Joining me is Ralph Valenti. Ralph, let's talk about AEW Dynamite to start off our show here. Before the show started Wednesday night, Bryan Alvarez teased that there was going to be something big that happened, something that fans are going to be talking about. A lot of fans after the show were like, wait, what was the big thing? Because there were some talking points here. Was it the fact that Katsuyori Shibata is going to be challenging Orange Cassidy for the All-Atlantic Championship? Is it the fact that Jeff Jarrett debuted and now has a director of business development role in AEW? Or is it the fact that Colt Cabana returned to AEW? And you're probably thinking to yourself, why? Why is this such a big thing? Well, if you go back to when this whole thing started between CM Punk and the Elite, it appears that the reason behind it all was because of Colt Cabana, and that he wasn't allowed in AEW because of CM Punk. He was only going to be moved to the Ring of Honor roster just so he could stay signed somewhere by Tony Khan. And here he is, as it seems like it's only a one-off, but still appearing on AEW Dynamite. So is this that big thing that Bryan Alvarez was talking about, that everyone's going to be talking about? That Colt Cabana answers Chris Jericho's open challenge in a losing effort for the Ring of Honor World Championship, but pretty much in a way confirming CM Punk is done?
I mean, if you look at what's going on today, I think that is probably the talking point that people are most focused on. And it doesn't even really have so much to do with the fact that Colt Cabana made his return or was the guy that came out to challenge Chris Jericho. It was more or less people presuming that that would mean it's like a nod of the cap that CM Punk is essentially done in AEW. So, yeah, I mean, obviously I tuned in because, you know, one, I was going to watch anyway, but there's always that extra level of intrigue and expectation when you get some type of promise or there's an expectation that something big is going to happen. Built my level of intrigue a little bit. I tend not to get as excited for these because more times than not, the more excited you get, it never really lives up to expectation. And, you know, it's definitely some big things and some big moments, depending on who you ask. But there really wasn't anything in my mind that I was like, you know, wow, that is a shocking thing that I saw. Shocking to me would have been like the Elite return.
But that's not really shocking. That's not
out.
really shocking because, one, they started teasing this thing last week and they do another video package this week. The whole thing where they edited out them winning the Trios Championship. So that's not really a surprise. That's not really big that everybody's going to be talking about. They're coming back.
It's bigger than anything that happened.
Face value, if you're just looking at it from Colt Cabana comes back and he's challenging Chris Jericho, yes, that's nothing. But the fact that everything seemed to have stemmed off this whole story between CM Punk and the Elite and Hangman Page with his promo that he cut all started with Colt Cabana. This kind of seems like Tony Khan, in a way, non-verbally telling his audience, those that are in the know, CM Punk is done. This is our statement. Punk is done. We're behind Colt Cabana. We're behind the Elite. Best of luck to you on your future endeavors, Phil Brooks.
Kind of a roundabout passive-aggressive way to do it, and I think it actually got some fans upset. The problem with this whole situation is a lot of it is hearsay. A lot of it is assumption. A lot of it is people reporting things that may or may not be true. The only things we know for sure is there was a fight backstage. Something may have been reported in a dirt sheet initially that got this whole thing kind of stirred up, and it bothered CM Punk, and CM Punk went off. We can assume that this may be a subtle nod or even a more matter-of-fact nod that, yeah, CM Punk's going to be done in AEW. I do feel more confident that, look, Punk is done. We haven't seen any type of promotion for him like we've seen with Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, even it being these promotions and promos where they're disappearing. But I do think this bothered some fans. And I actually kind of feel like this may not have been smart on their part. And I'm not against Colt Cabana coming back and challenging. If this is their way of going about saying, look, Punk's done, this is kind of a snub towards him, or certainly a snub towards him. And is that the best way to go about it?
I think there's so many fans out there that want to know and want a definitive answer of what's going on with this whole thing. And I think while Tony Khan can't actually say that Punk is gone verbally until they, agree to terms on this buyout, which seems to be The only thing that's left is agreeing to whatever terms on a no compete clause. At least that's what the report is. Other than that, there's really nothing else. There's no other roadblock here because apparently the potential litigation with CM Punk is now taken out according to reports. The Elite are coming back. Colt Cabana showed up, and I'm sure Hangman Page, when he is healthy again from his concussion, is going to come back no problem. So the next step at this point is what's next for CM Punk? And we even have more conflicting stories with this because one day it's, CM Punk is retiring. Those close to CM Punk feel like he's going to retire. And then the next day, it's reporting that he's still got the wrestling bug. There's multiple promotions interested in him, including WWE. And what makes it worse is because he's got a torn tricep injury, you're not going to know at least for another, 4 to 6 months? So what's next for CM Punk? We don't know. And again, until I see a statement from Tony Khan and AEW, until I hear a statement from CM Punk, I'm not believing anything these dirt sheets are saying or these journalists are saying about the whole thing. While we might have some validity to it, you still got to take it with a grain of salt.
Look, when this whole thing started, this whole second pipe bomb, whatever you want to call it, when he went all out or all in on the journalists and the Bucks and whoever else, he tore down the journalists for their lack of integrity and for their false reporting and stuff like that. I can't see him going to any reporter or any journalist or anybody who has a newsletter of any sort saying, yeah, I still want to wrestle. I still have the Bucks. Given the way he left WWE originally and how long it took him to come back to wrestling, to be convinced to come back to wrestling, it had to be the right thing. It had to make sense for him. And it took a long time for it to come to fruition. And it ended really bad. I don't think that Punk's wrestling again. I really don't. Maybe somewhere far down the line. Immediately, I don't see it unless he just wants to get back at AEW. And the only way he's going to do that, I think, is going to back to WWE.
If he goes back to WWE, you know the things that he's going to want. He's going to want that main event at WrestleMania. He's going to want to be paid as much or more than the top guys in WWE, if it's Roman Reigns or Brock Lesnar, if he feels like he's in that echelon. When you think about it, he's been gone for 7 years. His run in AEW was short, and they gave him the title twice, and he got injured within a week of both title reigns. If I'm Triple H, do I really want to take that risk?
I don't agree with you in this sense. I don't think that they'll have to pay him top. Maybe he's going to ask for it and maybe he'll want it. I'm not sure. One, I don't think they need him.
No.
Two, I don't think he's in a position to make demands. I don't think the way he was either excommunicated from AEW, I can't see him being able to go to Triple H or anybody in charge at WWE and say, this is what my expectations are. Had it been 3 years down the road, his contract runs out at AEW, he's testing the waters, he goes to them, he's a big star, his stock hasn't taken any hit, it may be different. They can offer him certain things that he's always wanted, main eventing WrestleMania or a big match at WrestleMania. I just don't know if that's something he's looking for. I think this is probably going to leave a bad taste in his mouth. And I don't think he's going to go back to wrestling for a long time.
He's closer to the end of his career than he is the beginning of his career. So if he's not going to go back to wrestling short term, I don't see him coming back long term. It'd be interesting to see what our Babel section says about this and where they think CM Punk's going. Does he make it back to WWE? Who knows? But you're talking about fans being upset at what happened on AEW Dynamite this week. Some might be upset at the fact that Colt Cabana was the one that answered Chris Jericho's open challenge and the fact of this whole thing being the passive-aggressive way that CM Punk is no longer with AEW. But some other things also happened that fans might not be appreciative about. And the one that started AEW Dynamite this week is Jeff Jarrett comes in and attacks Darby Allin with the guitar. And he is announced to be All Elite. And not only that, he has an executive role. He is the director of business development. So from what I understand, he's going to be in charge of getting the live events together for AEW and building, a tour schedule, I guess, and the arenas that they book or whatever to kind of grow AEW to the next level there. Plenty of backlash with this. A lot of people pointing out his history at the tail end of WCW, where he was pushed as a main eventer, TNA days, Impact Wrestling, and Global Force Wrestling. Do you think this backlash towards Jeff Jarrett is warranted? And do you actually think this is a good move for AEW?
Good move in the sense that he's a backstage mind that I think they'll be able to utilize smartly. I think they need more people like this working behind the scenes. The problem is, if last night's any indication, I don't think they're actually going to keep this as behind the scenes. I think he's going to be an on-air character, talent, whatever you want to call it. Look, man, Darby Allin, he's the guy he attacked. Darby Allin has been a guy that was like one of the originals, and I used to look forward to watching Darby Allin on a weekly basis, and there's just, to me, so many guys there that were the pillars or the originals or the guys that you really look forward to, at least I look forward to, that continued to be pushed to the back of the line in the back burner because, frankly, there's people either coming from Ring of Honor or New Japan or somebody who's past their prime, like Jeff Jarrett here. I think he could have a good role as maybe like a manager and a mouthpiece, kind of like JBL is doing for Baron Corbin in WWE. But, WWE has an advantage because they have more TV time. They have more shows. They have the ability to put some of their stars. If they want to find TV time for you, there's more of that TV time to allot. AEW doesn't have that. And I think sometimes we've seen time and time again, whether it's a guy that's super over like a Wardlow or an FTR, or you're an up-and-comer, like perhaps we're not quite seeing eye to eye on the up-and-comers.
I'm just saying, I'm just going by what fans think are the up-and-comers of AEW.
Ricky Starks, Powerhouse Hobbs. Your thoughts on Jeff Jarrett?
My thoughts on Jeff Jarrett, I think this is a good move. I think he will be an asset to AEW, a great mind behind the scenes. I question what's going to happen on screen too. I hope he's not going to be more of a full-time wrestler. If they pick and choose his matches like they do with Sting, I think it won't be as bad. I do somewhat understand the backlash if they're going by past history of him when he was pushed in WCW towards the tail end of the run there, the time and impact, the Global Force Wrestling stuff. And I don't think he's going to be the one that kind of politics his way to a world championship. I don't think that kind of stuff's going to happen. But who knows what's going to happen with the storylines. And speaking of storylines, last week we talked about Tony Khan calling Eric Bischoff a hypocrite because of criticisms about not having builds to matches and having all these random matches on AEW. Tony Khan calling him a hypocrite for it. Well, Eric Bischoff went on his 83 Weeks podcast and responded to these claims. Pretty much he said that was not his criticism to begin with, but here's what he did say about the criticism of AEW's booking. He said, "My issue and my comments about AEW and the creative behind it is really a bunch of top matches that don't have sufficient story or structure, or at least a compelling one. Your top matches, your A, B, C, and D storylines, that's different. I've seen a lot of matches, a lot of storylines, and what AEW considers a storyline that I feel are just nothing more than excuses for a match. They are not well-crafted stories. I believe in today's competitive environment with television being what it is, that if you want to," and he says, "pay attention, Tony, build and grow your audience, you are going to have to do it with well-crafted, compelling, well-structured storylines, and I don't see it. I see excuses for matches, and that's not a storyline." After reading it, I listened to the podcast, try to get like the way he presented the claim, and I'm trying to think to myself, does AEW right now have an ABCD storyline in place? Obviously, Moxley and MJF, Jericho Appreciation Society versus the Blackpool Combat Club, the tag team championship picture. Where's the fourth one? Where's that D storyline? I guess you could say what the Embassy versus Warjo that's now segueing into Wardlow versus Powerhouse Hobbs. They're there, but are they top storylines that you could be compelled to every week? Maxwell Jacob Freeman and John Moxley, yes. JAS and Blackpool Combat Club, I liked it. It's starting to, lose the heat a little bit. Tag team championship picture, it's interesting. It's not the best storyline, but it's better than what they've done in the past. And then Wardlow is just like, that might be an example Bischoff's talking about where it's an excuse of a match, not a storyline for a match.
He's echoing similar concerns like what we had mentioned last week. Sometimes I feel like the match goes before the story. there's so many different examples you can use, and we did go through that last week. I mean, if you want to use I think the example I used was Mance Warner taking on Moxley, and then Mance Warner just magically kind of disappearing. I don't feel like every single feud, every single match needs a story, but when he says your A, B, C, D storylines, I would imagine he means the guy that's the most over working an angle or a storyline, the heavyweight title, the tag team championships, anything that's supposed to mean something and be compelling. It's different than, hey, these guys are two great wrestlers, let's put them in the ring for 1 week and just let them kick the crap out of each other, because that's a good filler match. AEW has always done this. I think Forbidden Door is probably the biggest, most exaggerated example of that, because it was like guys came and went, Forbidden Door came and went. When Kenta came, everybody was like, oh my God, it's Kenta, the Forbidden Door. This is going to be the next big thing in pro wrestling. And nobody talks about Kenta anymore. Not in the sense that it made any compelling difference. Yeah, so sometimes I do feel like AEW will have these weird situations where there's one-off matches or a title eliminator, or somebody gets a championship match, or, two guys randomly end up feuding. Like we just mentioned, two guys, Will Hobbs and Ricky Starks. They were feuding. They had a match on the pay-per-view, and it just they just vanished off TV.
Well,
it was like they did
the lights out match on a Rampage like 2 or 3 weeks after the pay-per-view. So they did close out the storyline, just not on Dynamite. But it was still on TV. It's just not the most watched show on AEW's programming.
There was something you tweeted earlier today. There was a feud that had and this is another thing they do all the time. They have a big moment. Mm-hmm. There will be 3, 4, 5 weeks in between the next big moment, and people will champion that as long-term storytelling. That's not long-term storytelling. It's got to have development, in my mind, at least I would imagine on a weekly basis. Like something compelling leading to an arc, a conclusion, the climax of a story, a hero getting his triumphant revenge on a villain, like something like that. And I think a lot of times people will excuse the fact that AEW doesn't focus on those intricacies that they used to focus on quite a bit, especially in Cody storylines, but people don't want to hear that because it's like what people would say is a dream match, so to speak. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to give AEW a pass in that sense. I actually do think Eric Bischoff is right, very much right in this situation.
Right, and the example from Twitter was someone tweeted that it was long-term storytelling when at Forbidden Door, Katsuyori Shibata showed up and saved Orange Cassidy after being beat up by Pac. And then on this past Dynamite, the same thing happened after Orange Cassidy successfully retained the All-Atlantic Championship, and they're having their match on Rampage, Shibata versus Orange Cassidy. And they're saying that's long-term storytelling. I said, no, that's just 2 moments that led to a match. That long-term storytelling is there's plot point, plot point, plot point, plot point. Almost every single week, not 2 random moments that are separated 5 months apart. Now, is that match going to be good? Probably. Am I fully invested in it? And as most fans invested in it, you have to question it because there's a lot of people, whether AEW fans, the diehards want to admit this or not, don't know who Shibata is. If they don't know who he is, especially because the guy has only had 2 matches since 2017 and is lucky to have those 2 matches because he cracked his skull or had some brain injury or something that forced him out of wrestling, and here he is back wrestling again. And this is what Eric Bischoff is kind of saying as an excuse of a match. Now, he did also point out not every match on TV needs a reason, and we agreed to that extent. And this is kind of that example where it's on Rampage, it's a dream match, there's fans that are going to like this, they're going to get a good match out of it, so be it. But why not build a story out of it and make this a pay-per-view match? Extend the little story 3 weeks, and that's your D storyline. Orange Cassidy versus Shibata at Full Gear. But
3 weeks of vignettes.
Yeah.
3 weeks of vignettes.
Just explaining.
Shibata's coming. Shibata's coming. Shibata's coming. He doesn't say what he's doing. He doesn't say why he's going to show up. But at least, look, here's the thing. Especially, you just said not everybody knows who he is. Look, if you're smart enough, if you pay enough attention, you can go on the internet and you can look this stuff up. And honestly, I don't feel like anybody should have to do that. That's usually the convenient excuse that people will give. Oh, you can Google them. You shouldn't have to. That's not the job of the fan to go out of their way to do homework and try to figure out who these people are. Not only that, but you have a younger fan base. If you got like kids, teenagers, younger fans who aren't paying attention to every product, maybe just paying attention to AEW, if they watch AEW 3 weeks in a row before this guy shows up, okay, now there's investment. Now maybe they'll actually watch Rampage rather than the 400, 500, 600,000 people, however many people are going to tune in and watch that. It's investment. That's the name of the game. It's not just wrestling. I think sometimes people get so caught up on the star ratings and what's happening in between the ropes during a match. And it's like, no, this is very much show business too. Like your job is to sell the consumer that it's worth the time to sit down on the couch for 20 minutes on a Friday night when you can go have a beer or do whatever the hell you want to do. Look, if you don't know who he is, why would you watch the match? There's no investment.
Right. Now, there was something that was said on Eric Bischoff's podcast. He brought up, Tony Khan should consult with Kevin Sullivan, who is a producer at AEW and worked with Eric Bischoff in the past and talked about this 4 storyline thing in a Bible that they kind of presented to Viacom when TNA was on Spike TV. Listen to that clip because it makes a whole lot of sense, because this is stuff that you could be telling TBS, you could be telling WB Discovery to create promos for during commercial breaks on other types of programming. Like you had Major League Baseball playoffs on TBS and you watch the promos, there's nothing there other than, oh, look, it's Jon Moxley. Oh, look, it's Chris Jericho. But why don't you tell them in a 30-second promo, like what's happening? Like what's the cliffhanger? Tune into Dynamite to see this next. That's effective promotion. But instead it was, oh, we have 3.5 million viewers this year. Most people don't care about ratings unless you work in television or advertising. I honestly think Tony Khan should heed the advice of Eric Bischoff from the clip on 83 Weeks this week. He really should. And if you guys didn't listen to it, I'd recommend that just from that clip alone.
Because a lot of people will say that his advice is not valid because he tanked WCW. He drove them into the ground. They went out of business. It's all his fault, whatever. Sometimes you take advice from the people that made not just a lot of right decisions to almost topple WWE, but the guy that made the wrong decisions that led them down the wrong path. And honestly, it wasn't even all his fault. Very little of it really truly was his fault, depending on who you believe. For Tony to be dismissive of a guy who has had experience at a very high level, both dealing in TV, behind the scenes, with talent, with wrestlers, what works, what doesn't work, he'd almost be ignorant and dumb, for the lack of a better way to say it, not to take the advice of an Eric Bischoff. Even if he doesn't even take 100% of that advice to the bank, knowing that Bischoff did make mistakes, but Bischoff made those mistakes, and it's like, look, he could have learned from that. Tell Tony, don't do what I did, do this. Like, this is what I learned from this situation. And sometimes people are very dismissive of Eric Bischoff because they just don't want to acknowledge flaws in AEW.
That's true. And they'll find every reason to say, oh, let's just discredit him because he drove WCW to the ground. He failed in TNA. He got fired twice at WWE. Like everyone gets fired in wrestling. Even Vince.
Everyone gets fired for most.
Technically, now we could say everybody gets fired in wrestling because, I mean, he retired, but kind of was forced out of his job due to the allegations. Of course, I'm talking about Vince McMahon. And the news came out this week that the investigation of these allegations are over. It cost WWE nearly $20 million to have this investigation. And they had their financial call this week. And while the chief financial officer, Frank Riddick, said that he could come back, Fightful Select did learn from the spokesperson in WWE saying, no, Vince is done. Triple H is staying where he is. Stephanie's staying where she is. Nick Khan's staying where he is. And another higher up pointed out how the company has a very high morale right now, maybe the highest they've seen in a decade. While there were initial reservations and hesitations regarding Vince's departure, that's no longer the case. So anyone that thinks Vince is coming back, it's not happening. And especially we'll see what the investigation actually comes out to. But I think we could safely say we could turn the page with this. Triple H is here to stay. Stephanie's here to stay. A new era in WWE. And so far, from a business aspect, if you look at that call, they had a very good quarter this year. Their revenue, I think, was $385 million. They just did a new deal with Peacock, or not Peacock, Hulu, although it's a short term to try to get that even longer, give them a little extension to negotiate even further. And an $8 million gate at Clash at the Castle? Not bad. Not bad. Right. So a lot of positive news here. And I think a lot of fans that were cautious of Vince returning, I think could take a deep breath now. And it seems like that's not happening.
I think it's honestly, at this point, it's probably for the better. I wouldn't say he's pivoted totally to one way or the other. The storylines are still pretty much the same. It doesn't feel like a completely different show. Mm-hmm. Like it wasn't like somebody flipped a light switch, but there's definitely some differences, and it's definitely a much different product that has a lot more life to it. The matches are much better. The storylines are more concrete week to week, not quite all over the place. And honestly, he's putting wrestlers in positions that normally wouldn't get certain opportunities.
Yep.
So
there's obviously going to be some things that stay the same from the old regime to the new regime. And one of those being, you know, the Saudi Arabia shows, Crown Jewel happening this weekend. We're going to take our predictions in a few minutes. And also the fact that releases are happening still, although it's NXT. And we kind of learned this from a while ago that there's going to be like 90-day evaluations. And if you're not making the cut, they're going to just release you because it's better to do it now in the early stages than, you know, I guess when you're on the main roster and, you know, have a storyline and then mid-storyline, you're just gone. Although, what's his name? Bodie from Chase U got released. But from what I read, there could have been backstage issues that led to that release. Crown Jewel is Saturday, Ralph. We've heard that they're safely there. I know there's a lot of animosity towards this show and a lot of, you know, worry based on what's going on in the news in that area. And let's just hope everybody can perform and everybody's safe and they can get back home safe. But let's make our predictions for Crown Jewel. There are 8 matches on this show, the most we have seen in a Triple H era pay-per-view. And we'll start with Braun Strowman versus Omos. The Battle of the Giants. Who you got in this one, Ralph?
I'm going to go with Strowman, even though they've kind of been pushing Omos much stronger the past like 3 weeks, I would say, but I'm going with Strowman.
It would be kind of stupid to sign him back and kind of push him the way they did when he came back, only to have him lose to Omos. Yeah. I think Omos is more of a Vince's project than it is a Triple H project. I think that is Braun Strowman winning over Omos. Next up, we have 6-man tag action. AJ Styles, Luke Gallows, and the never openweight champion for now, Carl Anderson, going up against the Judgment Day, Finn Balor, Damian Priest, and Dominic Mysterio with Rhea Ripley in their corner. The OC don't have an answer for the Rhea problem, but do they have someone that comes to Saudi Arabia to answer the problem and help them to victory?
This is another tough one because, again, we just talked about re-signing people, and obviously we have, you know, Gallows and Anderson, what we'd imagine back under WWE banner, at least for a short period of time. Who knows how long? Judgment Day can't really afford a loss, I don't think. Maybe Edge makes an appearance. We don't know. I'm going with Judgment Day in this match.
I think I'm going to go with the OC. I don't know who's going to be the one that answers the Rhea problem that comes in to neutralize her, but
is it Beth?
Maybe it's Beth. Perhaps it's Charlotte.
Lita?
Does Charlotte come back for that? Who knows?
Could be.
It'd be interesting to see, but I think someone comes to the aid of the OC and gives them the victory. It wouldn't be a terrible loss for the Judgment Day because they've done a lot of winning this past month. Maybe this leads to some sort of War Games match? One of the 2 War Games matches? I don't know. But next up, I never thought I'd make this prediction so early in our prediction list, but it's Brock Lesnar versus Bobby Lashley. No title involved in this, just 2 big guys, former MMA fighters, duking it out to see who's the tougher SOB in the match. Bobby Lashley beat Brock Lesnar at the Royal Rumble, but that was obviously thanks to Paul Heyman and Roman Reigns. Do they make it? Brock Lesnar even it out and try to get a 3rd match out of these guys? Or does Bobby Lashley get a big victory over Brock Lesnar and go 2-0 over the Beast Incarnate?
Well, this one's a tough one to predict. I am going to say this is one of the very rare times where I honestly wouldn't mind seeing a draw. I think they could do it very easily. The whole storyline between these two is just them going after each other, trying to kick the crap out of each other. So it could very easily culminate at like a Royal Rumble or WrestleMania inside a Hell in a Cell, which we talked about for like a blood feud and for a big feud. Makes sense to do it if it's a main event type thing. If it main events and they both crash through the ring and the ring gets destroyed, like in true Lesnar fashion, and it's a draw, I would not be opposed to that.
Could do,
and that's what I'm going to hope for.
They could do something where Bobby Lashley spares Lesnar through something. Not the barricade, because they do that way too many times, but something where it causes both of them to get counted out, and that's an easy way to, make the draw and then pursue it somewhere else. Maybe Survivor Series, maybe Royal Rumble, but I want to see this match. I'm excited for it, and if there's a third one, I'd be excited for that one too. But the next match will definitely not have a disqualification or a count out because it's a steel cage match. Drew McIntyre versus Karrion Kross with Scarlett Bordeaux on his side. So how do they book this one? This is going to be a tough one, I think. Both need the win. Both could be protected with the steel cage, obviously. But I think whoever wins this, I think, is going to be in the driver's seat to potentially be the next number one contender against Roman Reigns or whoever wins that match later on.
Well, I don't think Drew's going to challenge for the title again. They brought back Karrion Kross, kind of pushed him right to the top. I still think if they're going to try to solidify him winning over Drew, even if it's again or whatever you want to say in this, it's definitely needed. I think Karrion Kross is going to win the match.
I would agree with you on that. I do think Karrion Kross wins this one. I mean, you would think this leads him to the Universal Championship match, but he's a heel. Roman, I guess he's kind of turning face. The fans are getting behind him, so it wouldn't be like a complete turn on Roman Reigns. I think that might be the route they go. Next up, we have the Women's Tag Team Championship match, a rematch from Monday Night Raw. Alexa Bliss and Asuka, who beat Dakota Kai and Io Sky, get their rematch less than a week later. Wait a minute. I thought Vince left WWE. What the hell is this booking shit?
Yeah, this is a head scratcher. I was actually surprised they lost the titles. I'll be even more surprised if they win the titles back. I can't see them taking the titles back off them after they just won it. I'm going to go Asuka and Alexa.
I'm making a bold prediction here, Ralph. Dakota Kai and Io Sky are going to win those titles back because this whole story between Damage Control and Bianca and Alexa and Asuka has really been 50-50 booking, and it's not helping the women's division. And speaking of this storyline, that brings us to our next match for the Raw Women's Championship match, a last women standing match, Bianca Belair against Bayley. So do you think Bianca retains, or does the 200-plus day reign of Bianca Belair end with Bayley?
This is a tough one, too. They're all tough to predict, but I will say this. Damage Control has kind of been like on a roller coaster since their debut back at SummerSlam. Ups and downs. They've certainly been a part of some of the more questionable booking you could say about Triple H and his approach to just everything in general, and they've been a part of that. I just don't know if Bayley can afford a loss. There's nothing wrong with her losing to Bianca, but to lose multiple times, I don't know if they'll pull the title off of Bianca in Saudi Arabia. I'm going to say Bayley wins.
I agree with you. Bayley's going to win this. That's why it's a last woman standing match. They have to find a way to protect Bianca. And this story is far from over because I think eventually we're going to see some of that Survivor Series with these 6 women. Maybe add Candice LeRae into the mix and Nikki Cross, and that's your women's War Games match. Maybe they do a 3-on-3 War Games instead of 4-on-4. Winner takes all War Games match. That could be another possibility too. But next up, we have the Undisputed Tag Team Championship match. The Usos looking to break the New Day's record as longest reigning tag team champions. If they win this match, they will, I think, clinch that spot because they won't have to defend it until at least after next week's SmackDown against the Brawling Brutes, Ridge Holland, and the artist formerly known as Pete Dunne, now known as Butch.
The Usos aren't losing.
You don't think so?
As long as Roman's champion, unless this starts to be the unraveling. I mean, they are trying to play the Jey Uso hothead. Maybe Sami Zayn cost them the titles.
Sami Zayn's not going to be there.
I just don't see it.
Sami's not going to be there.
Oh, you're right. There's that big thing where Sami doesn't go. Yeah, that's true. No, I don't.
So Sami can't keep the peace and make Jey Uso, act Usi, so his head could get to him and cost them the match. And this starts the downward spiral of the bloodline. Why bring up the fact that Sami Zayn could be not just a full-time Us, but be Sami Uso? It could be foreshadowing. If the Usos lose this match, Sami Zayn is now a full-time Us.
I don't see it.
You don't see it.
I just don't see them taking the titles off the Usos. I like the Brawling Brutes. I think they're great. Sheamus has taken time off. I mean, he just got married and stuff, so I don't think he'll be back anytime soon. Not that he has to be there, but yeah, I don't think so.
All right, but we go to the main event. Roman Reigns versus Logan Paul for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. It's Rocky versus Apollo, Ralph. All it's going to take is one lucky punch, and Logan Paul wins this thing. Now, there's been some teases that Logan Paul could come with backup, and that being Jake Paul, who just beat Anderson Silva via decision, but still beat him nonetheless. So can the Paul brothers make two big upsets in back-to-back weekends?
Mastermind booking, mastermind strategy here for WWE, knowing that Jake Paul was going to get a lot of attention, a lot of press leading into this week, leading into this event. And I would imagine Logan Paul will get a lot of attention, even subtly by association, just by saying Jake Paul, whose brother Logan Paul will be competing, or Logan Paul, whose brother Jake just defeated such and such. So smart marketing there, because anytime you look up Logan Paul, you're going to get Jake Paul, Logan Paul, same thing. So that's probably part of the reason why they booked this. They were like, hey, these are coincidentally very close to each other, and that's my assumption. That said, Roman Reigns not losing this match.
Yes, he is.
I don't even need to go any further than that.
He's losing.
There's no way.
Yes, he is. Via disqualification.
You scared me for a sec. I was going to say, there's just no way. No logical sense, no booking sense, no way you'd waste it on.
You don't want.
Will the match be good? Yes.
Yes, I think the match is going to be a lot better than people are expecting. And I think the story told is going to play out very well with this match. The fact that all it's going to take is one lucky punch. Like, I really expect this to be Roman's is just going to be one-sided for a good 8 to 10 minutes and just beating the crap out of Logan Paul. But Logan Paul keeps getting up and keeps getting up and keeps getting up. It's literally going to be Rocky. It's Rocky against Apollo. That is the story that's going to happen in this match. And what happened in Rocky 2? He got one lucky punch. Yes, they both fell to the ground, but Rocky was the one that got up and won the match.
Does he punch him outside the ring
and get counted out? It's possible they do that. It's possible Jey Uso, gets involved and accidentally gets Roman disqualified. Does Roman do the same thing he did with Seth Rollins when he knew he couldn't beat him because Seth Rollins would not give up? So he just got himself disqualified. They could definitely do that too. Maybe do what was supposed to happen at WrestleMania 8, where it looked like the babyface was going to win. Then the run-in causes the disqualification. And then maybe Jake Paul comes in after that. And you have the closing moment of both brothers. Maybe that's the route they go. But I definitely think Logan Paul's winning that match. He's not going to win he's not going to be the champion, but he's going to win. And that's a bold prediction.
He'll have bragging rights.
What's that?
He'll have bragging rights. He'll have bragging rights.
And you know what? You get a rematch out of it. Royal Rumble. But if you like this episode of the Squared Circle Psychobabble, give us the 1, 2, 3. 1, like this video. 2, be a part of the Babble section by subscribing. And 3, ring that bell to be notified so you don't miss another episode of the Squared Circle Psychobabble.